All right, everybody, we're going to get started. Adrian and Keisha and Deirdre, are you about ready?
I'm ready.
Yes,
Ready to
thanks,
start when you
Michelle.
are.
Okay, sounds good. All right, I'm taking note of the time because it already started recording, so I just want to make sure I cut out all the beginning. So for those of you that are on this webinar, this session is being recorded and it will be posted to the Connecticut State Department of Education website. Everyone on the call is on mute. However, you can use the chat to pose any questions that you have during the webinar. My name is Michelle Rosado. I work at the Connecticut State Department of Education, and I'd like to thank you all for attending this webinar today regarding the Connecticut SAT School Day, specifically on everything about accommodations for your students with special ed, IEP, or ELML. So I'd like to turn it over to my other colleagues from the State Department of Education to introduce themselves.
Great, thanks, Michelle. Good morning, everyone. Actually, good afternoon. My name is Deirdre Ducharme, and I work with the Office of Student Assessment and support all of our students and their accessibility needs across our statewide assessments, including the Connecticut SAT School Day. I work closely with Keisha from the College Board. So as you're preparing your students for the upcoming Connecticut SAT School Day, Spring Administration, if you have any questions about accessibility features on the new digital SAT or questions about available accommodations, please reach out to me or the College Board. Thanks for taking time out of your busy day to join us. And I'm now going to pass the baton to my colleagues at the College Board. Keisha?
Actually, let's just stop, and we have Abe on and Katie. So if Abe and Katie could just introduce themselves. And of course, I have to point out that that dog in the photo is my dog. And yes, she does enjoy playing pickleball. So if you need a partner, she's your gal.
Hi, everyone. I'm Katie Seifer. I am another member of the Student Assessment Team, Special Populations. Great to meet you all.
Hi, thanks, Michelle. Abe Chris from the Performance Office. I don't think my camera's working, but thanks everybody from the districts for attending. This is an important webinar today for setting accommodations, and look forward to hearing from all our experts at College Board and my colleagues in the Performance Office. So thanks for attending again.
All right, Adrian, turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Michelle. So hi, everybody. I'm Adrienne Cupper. I work at the College Board. I have worked for a number of years with our good friends at the Connecticut State Department of Education, supporting our work with you for the Connecticut SAT School Day each spring. I have a number of colleagues with me today as well. I'm going to turn it over to Keisha to introduce herself.
Thank you, Adrian. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Keisha Smith. I am the Senior Director for SSD Customer Service. I work closely with Adrian and her team to support CDE very closely. As Deirdre mentioned, we are a team during this process to ensure that we are delivering accommodations to students participating in spring testing.
Awesome. Thank you, Keisha. And James, can you introduce yourself?
Certainly. James Wilson, work with Adrian in several states, but Connecticut is the most important amongst them all, as a former New Englander myself. So always like to reconnect with Connecticut virtually or in person.
Thank you, sir. And then we have one more College Board staff member with us. Michelle Cosner is with us. And Michelle, I'm not sure if you're able to say hello. Oh, great.
Yeah, sure. Happy to say hello. Michelle Cosner, Director K-12. So I support districts in Connecticut, and so happy to join today.
Thank you, Michelle. So we have a number of things to cover today. We're gonna talk through just some information about our new digital SAT test, how it kind of is being administered in Connecticut. We'll talk about some accommodations and some of the changes that you're going to see in accommodations from the digital testing you used to do with us on the CAI platform to our new digital testing on the College Board platform. We're going to talk about some sample scenarios, things to consider when you're requesting accommodations for your students. We'll also talk about multilingual learner supports, and we'll take the opportunity to answer your questions as well. Please feel free to put your questions into the chat at any point throughout the course of the presentation. We are more than happy to answer them as we go through, but we'll also take some time at the end specifically for Q&A as well. So just thanks in advance for spending the next kind of hours with us. All right, so in today's sessions, we want to make sure that you have the information that you need about SSD accommodations requests for the spring of 2024 administration. We want to make sure that you're clear on the role and the tasks that are part of the role of SSD coordinator, and that you have a good sense of how to go through and submit accommodation requests and how to review the existing accommodations that your students may have already in the system. So we're going to kind of cover all of this stuff. But before we do that, I just want to make a call out. We want to be thoughtful about student personally identifiable information, and this is specifically when we talk with SSD coordinators, this is always a topic to make sure we hit, because when you're talking to us about kids and their accommodations needs, it can be tempting to send us an email that has, you know, all sorts of information about a student. But we want to be really thoughtful about any student personally identifiable information that is being shared in email, right? So we want to think through, make sure things like name and date of birth and like SSD number, stuff like that, is considered student personally identifiable information, and we want to be thoughtful and careful with how we treat student data. So if you do need to share student PII with us, please do so via telephone. If you're going to reach out to us via email, maybe you can reach out and say, I need to have a conversation with you, and we set up a quick time to talk. But we just want to be really thoughtful about any student PII that's in email, because we want to be really thoughtful and careful about our students' data and how we treat that. Okay, so just one thing to keep in mind. Let's talk about the Connecticut testing window and SSD deadlines. So in Connecticut schools participate in Connecticut SAT school day testing for all grade 11 students. The testing window opens on March 4th and runs through April 19th. Okay, so you have a number of weeks at your school to determine when you want to test your students and kind of what works best for your school and for your students for testing. You have a lot of choice though, there's a lot of dates in that window that you can choose from. Please know that you should plan that you need to make sure that all grade 11 students have tested by April 19th. So it's important to just be aware of and keep track of the students that have tested and the students that you still may need to test, and make sure that everybody has tested by April 19th. And then when we're talking about the testing window, we're thinking about making sure that kids have their accommodations requests. The deadline for accommodations requests and for the multilingual time and 1/2 support is January 12th of 2024. So we're going to talk about the SSD coordinator role a little bit so that we can, many of you have been SSD coordinators for years and you've worked with us for a long time, but even if you've been with us for a while, the role of the SSD coordinator in digital testing is a little bit different. In College Board digital testing is a little bit different. So let's talk about that. The SSD coordinator in your school is responsible for submitting accommodations requests for all students that have an implemented IEP or 504 plan. The SSD coordinator is also responsible for submitting multilingual time and 1/2 requests for those eligible students who require extended time for testing. The SSD coordinator also is the one at the school who communicates with students and with families about the testing accommodations that may be necessary for them when they are taking the SAT school day. An important task for the SSD coordinator, one that we can't stress enough as being something you do up front because it makes things a lot easier if you've done this first, is that you go through and review the accommodations for any students that have previously been approved for accommodations for other College Board tests. So remember, if a student is approved for a College Board test, if they took, AP test last year, or they took PSAT and MSQT in the fall, if they had approval for those tests, in many cases, in most cases, those accommodations continue and the student remains approved for those. And so you're going to want to go back, you're going to want to look at all the kids that have approved accommodations in SSD Online already. And you just want to make sure that those accommodations still meet the accessibility needs of those students, right? Because sometimes student needs change, sometimes IEP changes happen, from year to year, or 504 plan changes happen from year to year. So you do want to make sure, that that in the that what is in SSD Online is still current and applicable for that student. And then you're also going to assist the test coordinator with administering the College Board tests, the practice tests to students, to the students who test with accommodations, because we want to make sure that, especially this is new for all of your students, or for many of your students, especially if they didn't test in the fall, this is a new platform, and we want to make sure that the accommodations that the student has, that they've had a chance to try them out in the new platform, that they've got a chance to experience them, and that if something isn't working for them, or if maybe it's not sure that accommodation that's in there meets their needs in our new digital testing platform, that they've had a chance to figure that out, and we have plenty of time to work with you to make sure we're meeting the students' needs. So having the students practice, or at least have the experience of going into a practice test and taking some of the test questions using the accommodations that are available even before the accommodations request deadline can be a good way of making sure okay, I need to submit a change request for this student, or this student's new to me and I need to request accommodations. What should I request? So working through using the practice test as a chance for kids to try an accommodation out can make it a lot easier for you to know what you need to request for a student. And then the SSD coordinator is also responsible for assisting the test coordinator in determining room and staff requirements, the room and staff required to administer the test to the kids with accommodations. And you also work with the test coordinator and the technology coordinator to make sure that student testing devices are ready for test day, that they're configured to support any assistive technology a student might need for their testing accommodations. And then finally, you partner with the test coordinator to make sure that the Connected SAT School Day is administered successfully to all students who are testing with accommodations. If you're a returning SSD coordinator, so if you've done this for a while, we just want to make sure that you still have access to SSD Online. So please go in, just log into your College Board account, log into SSD Online, and make sure that your username and password still active. Everything works as it should. If you have a problem, if you can't remember your username or password or whatnot, there's a forgot username and password link that you can use. But we just want to make sure that, well before the accommodations deadline, you've gone in, you've made sure you can still get into SSD Online and everything works well, so nobody's panicked when you get to the deadline. If you're a new SSD coordinator, what you need to do right away is to request access to the SSD Online system. So schools need to have an attending institution code, an AI code, to establish for a coordinator to establish access in SSD Online. Your AI code is the same as it was in previous years. I think we may have a very small number of new schools where we're still working on getting you AI codes, but for just about everybody else, your AI code is the same as it's been before. So if you're new as an SSD coordinator, go to your test coordinator, find out what your AI code is if you need some help, and then you use that information. You complete the SSD coordinator form and you return it to College Board. When you return that to College Board, it normally is 2 or 3 days to process that. You'll get an email when we've received the form, when it's been submitted, and then in a couple of days you'll have access to SSD Online, and then you can start doing what you need to do to request accommodations for students. Each school needs to have one primary SSD coordinator, and that's who we will do the main communication with at the school. But if your school or your district allows this, you can have more than one SSD coordinator in the SSD Online system. So, some schools, especially larger schools, will have their primary SSD coordinator and maybe a couple other folks that have SSD Online access, and you'll split up the work of entering accommodations requests. Especially if, like I said, if you have a larger school. So, so do know you can have more than one SSD coordinator per school in SSD Online. All right, so let's talk about the digital SAT. Some of you may know this information, but we want to make sure that everybody in the session has some of this baseline information to go from, because this is important stuff to know how we're going to work together over the next couple months. So the digital SAT is not just an old paper version on a computer, but it is a different test. It works differently. And so I want to talk you through, there are two sections to the test. There's reading and writing, and there's math. If we look at reading and writing, in the paper version of the test, or last year's digital version of the test that you guys used, there were 96 questions across two sections of reading and writing. Now in the new digital test, there's 54 total questions, and it's one section. There's one reading and writing section. Previously, there were 100 total minutes of test time for this section, with 1.04 minutes per question. In the new digital assessment, there's 64 minutes of total test time for this section, and that's 1.19 minutes per question. And in the previous version of the SAT, there were set-based questions. So you see a reading passage and then several questions associated with that reading passage. In the new digital SAT, there are discrete questions. So there's a reading passage and one question associated with that reading passage. In the math section, there are some changes to the math section as well. Previously, there were 58 total questions across two sections in math. There was a calculator section and a no calculator section. In the new digital SAT, there are 44 total questions, and there is one section for math. And in that one section for math, calculator can be used the whole time. Previously, there were 80 total minutes of testing time for math, 1.38 minutes per question. In the new digital SAT, there are 70 minutes of testing time for math, and that is 1.59 minutes per question. And then in the old version of the SAT, there were discrete and set-based questions. There were multiple choice questions. About 78% of the questions were multiple choice, and about 22% were student-produced response questions. In the new digital SAT, there are discrete questions, no more set-based questions. So there are still some reading passages in the math section, but there'll be a reading passage, and then there'll be one question associated with that passage. We continue to have multiple choice questions. There are 4 option multiple choice questions. 75% of the questions are multiple choice, and 25% of the questions are student-produced response questions. And the digital SAT is multi-staged adaptive testing. So most of the time when we talk about adaptive testing, people think about item level adaptive, which means you answer one question, and then the next question you see is based on how you answered the first question. And the next question you see after that is based on how you answered the question before that one. And so that's what people think about a lot when you think about adaptive testing. The SAT is different. The SAT is a multi-stage adaptive test. What that means is that there is a set of questions, we call them modules, and the students take that module, that set of questions, and then their performance on that first set of questions determines the second set of questions that they see. This approach to testing makes it possible for us to have shorter testing length, right? So as you saw, there is, especially in that reading and writing section, there's a lot. The time is significantly less. So when you look at it, it's just about a little bit less than an hour shorter than the test that was given last year. And that's a great thing for you. It's a great thing for students. We want them to have the shorter testing experience. Now, within the test, though, like I said, there are these modules. Students, if a student is in module 1 and they're doing the questions in module 1 and they want to go back and look at a question that they did earlier in the test, as long as they're within the same module, they can go back and review questions, right? They can navigate throughout the questions in the module. And so they still can have that kind of experience that they used to have, which was, oh, I don't know how to answer this one, or I'm not sure if that's the right answer. Let me move to the next one. I'll come back to it when I have time. And so they still have that opportunity within our multi-stage adaptive tests. And another example of a multi-stage adaptive test in addition to the SAT is the GRE. So as I mentioned, each section has 2 modules. And so here on the screen, there's a graphic here to try to help illustrate that. So, each section, so reading and writing and math, each section has 2 modules. The first module that a student gets, it's a broad mix of easy, medium, and hard questions. And then based on the student performance in that first module, they then go to module 2. And what they see in module 2 is a targeted mix of questions based on their performance in module 1. And then the student score for that section is a combination of their submissions for module 1 and their submission for module 2. Now, this test that we've just kind of talked about a little bit, there are two systems that we use to administer this test to students. Okay, so the first system is Blue Book. That is the student-facing testing application. That is a downloadable testing application that has to be downloaded onto student devices. But students, they are the ones that use Blue Book. And then there's Test Day Toolkit. That is that's the administrator application. That's a web-based application, so you don't need to download it. You just go to your web browser to access Test Day Toolkit, and that's what test coordinators and proctors will use. That's what SSD coordinators will use on test day to administer the tests to students. When we're talking about student devices, as we think about this, so students and educators, everybody who's touching the test in some way, whether you're taking it or giving it, you need to have a device. Those devices can be laptops or tablets. Those could be laptops and tablets could be school owned and managed, or they can be student owned if your district or school allows students to use their own devices. But laptops and tablets can be school owned or student owned. And then there are school managed devices, Chromebooks and desktops. Obviously desktops because they're in the school. They're going to be managed by the school. But Chromebooks, this is an important call out. Chromebooks, using Chromebooks for testing, you must use school managed Chromebooks. You can't use personal Chromebooks, so a student can't have their own Chromebook, bring that in and use it. And that is because, so they must be school managed. And that is because the Blue Book application is a kiosk app, and the kiosk apps have to be pushed out to devices using the Google Admin Console. So, you just need to be very clear that for any Chromebook usage, those Chromebooks have to be school managed Chromebooks. Now, for kind of power, your device that you have students using need to be able to hold a charge for 3 hours of testing time. That's the standard time, for students taking the test with the standard time. Now, if you have students taking the test with extended time, you will need to make sure that their device can hold a charge for as long as they're supposed to be testing. We recommend for students testing with extended time that you make sure those students have access to power, that they have their plugs, their cords with them, their charging cables with them, and that they have access to an outlet, because those tests are a bit longer. So you're going to want to make sure that those students have power throughout the whole test. And then all devices, whether they're student devices or administrator devices, educator devices, all devices need to be able to connect to Wi-Fi. Student devices must be able to connect to Wi-Fi at the beginning of the test and at the end of the test. They need to connect at the beginning so that they can download the test package that they're going to take. They need to connect at the end so that their answer submissions can be sent up to us and scored. In the middle, it's great if they are connected to Wi-Fi throughout, because it enables them to keep sending us information. But if your student should lose Wi-Fi access or internet access in the middle of the test, that's fine. It's not going to affect their ability to test. We know that has been a problem in the past, where kind of, if your school's, Wi-Fi went down in a room or something, it prevented them from being able to move forward in the test. With our new digital SAT, a kid, even if they don't have access to Wi-Fi in the middle of the test, if it's dropped or the room has had an issue, they can keep testing. And then when they get to the end, they connect again. By the end, they should connect again and be able to send their responses to us. So all devices need to connect to Wi-Fi. In Blue Book, we have a number of universal tools that are available to all students. These tools are things, like I said, available to all students. You don't need to submit an accommodation request for any of these things. We have an answer eliminator or strike through. There's a question navigator. So like I said, students can kind of go back and forth and navigate to questions within a module. So this question navigator helps them do that. There's the option to expand a passage or expand an item. There's a student clock. Each device will have its own student clock on it, and that will count down the time that the student has for each section, and it gives students a 5-minute warning when they're at the end of when they're nearing the end of their time for that section. There's a zoom in and out feature. There's a color contrast feature. There's a calculator, a built-in calculator, a Desmos calculator. There's a math reference sheet, an annotator tool that allows students to highlight and use a notepad. And there's a mark for review option. Students can practice, a lot of students have used the Desmos calculator, but some have not. If you would like, you can have your students practice using the Desmos calculator at the web address on the screen. Give them a chance to get used to it. Students are still allowed to bring their own calculator if that's something they like. Some students, their scientific calculator is like an extension of their body, and they want to keep that calculator with them. Other students, they may not want to, or maybe they don't have access to a calculator, and so all students will have the built-in Desmos calculator to use. So we're just going to look at a couple of the tools that are available. The first one, as I mentioned, the built-in Desmos graphing calculator, and there's the math reference sheet. So as was put in earlier, you can practice using the calculator at the Desmos site. We also have a digital test preview of the test, which gives you an opportunity. It's in Bluebook. A student can log into Bluebook and just see the digital test preview. You as educators can download and log into Bluebook, and using your educator account credentials can be able to access the digital test preview as well. So if you'd like to get a better sense of it and you'd like to see how Bluebook works, you can download Bluebook, use your account, your College Board professional account login, and go in and take use the digital test preview as well. In the digital test preview, you can see the calculator. There's also the flag and review options. So at the top of each question, kind of where the number is, go to the other side there, you'll see this little red flag. If a student wants to flag something, they click on that flag and it'll turn it red. And that way a student knows, I want to come back to this. Either I didn't know the answer and I got to come back to answer it, or I did, I gave an answer, I maybe want to review it, make sure I did it right if I have time. And so you can flag the questions and come back and review them later. A student can navigate throughout the module using the forward and back buttons, but they don't have to do that. At the bottom of the page, there's a little button that they can push. It says question. In this case, it says question 7 of 14, but it'll say whatever question they're on of however many questions they have. They click on that, a little tray pops up, and they'll be able to see the number of questions. They'll be able to see anything they flagged. So in the case on the screen, you'll see number 7 is flagged with the red flag. They know that that's the one they wanted to go back and review. And if they click on that one, that'll take them right to that question. There's also a test timer. As I mentioned, each student will see their test timer on their device. The test timer, though, so it's there, and it's there for them to be able to keep on top of how much testing time they have. That's great for some students, but some students don't like seeing the timer tick down. So those students are welcome to hide the timer. You just click the hide button, you can hide it. If they hit it and now they want to see it again, you just click unhide and it's gonna display it again. And as I said before, when a student reaches 5 minutes left in the section, it will the timer will pop back up so that students are aware that their testing time is drawing to a close. And then there's a full set of annotation tools, right? So a student can highlight text. So if they're reading this section, this little passage here, and they want to make sure that they highlight that, they want to keep that in mind, they can highlight. They can also annotate. They can make notes in the annotation box. If a student highlights or annotates a question, if they move on to the next one, they keep going through the module and they come back to review, the annotation and the highlighting is saved as long as the student is in that module. So let's look through there, and I think there was a question that popped in the chat. I'm seeing them kind of populate here, but there was the question is always, I have some kids that have College Board approved accommodations already. We had them, last year for testing we did last year. What do I do there, right? So we're going to talk through some of the commonly requested accommodations, and in the case of some of the things that may already be approved in your students' accounts, what that will look like for them in the new digital testing. So let's start with extended time. For extended time, so we have a number of different extended time accommodations. The ones that are kind of more commonly requested are 1.5 times or 50% extended time, and then there's double time, which is 100% extended time. When a student receives extended time for reading, they receive extended time for the entire test. So the reading and the math sections. Math has significant reading in it, and so that's why that student will get extended time for both sections of the test. If you request extended time for math only for a student, that student receives extended time only on the math section of the test. And then with any extended time accommodation and also with any sort of break accommodations, the timing that a student has, the breaks that a student has received approval for. The test package comes configured with that. So when the student sits down the test on test day, their test package is configured with the time they're supposed to have, and it's configured with the breaks they're supposed to have. You no longer, and people from last year remember having to set accommodations in Tide for students. That is no longer a step you need to do. With the new College Board Digital SAT, the test package a student receives is automatically configured to support the accommodations for which they are approved. And then for extended time, it's important to remember that students do have to sit for the entire time of that they have been allotted for testing. So there's no self-pacing. So if a student is approved for time and a half, if they're done early, they need to sit for the entire time of that section, even if they're done early. Okay, that's an important thing to consider. We're going to talk about that a little bit more as we look at some of the scenarios a little bit later in the presentation. So there are also a number of break accommodations. For example, there's breaks as needed. That's a stop the clock kind of break situation. So a student approved for breaks as needed receives an exam that allows them to stop the test when they need to stop it, to take a break as needed. And so there is a pause feature that appears below the timer for students to see, and students are able to stop and take the break as they need it. If a student has extended breaks, that student is approved for a break that is twice as long as the standard testing break. So in the setup for digital SAT, there is a 10-minute break between the reading and writing section and the math section. If a student is approved for extended breaks, they will get, instead of 10 minutes, they get 20 minutes there. And then there are extra breaks. So in the case of extra breaks, students are approved, and then their exam will be configured to support them receiving not only the standard 10-minute break in between the two sections, but an additional 5-minute break in between the two modules. We're going to look at a graphic in a little bit to help show what that looks like. And then if a student has extra and extended breaks, they receive a combination of these two things, right? They receive the additional breaks as well as longer breaks. For these students, though, again, their test package is configured to support those breaks. And so they receive a test that will automatically have those breaks that they're approved for built into their test experience. When we look at timing, SAT testing time, as I mentioned, the test is shorter than it used to be. So this includes breaks. Standard testing time is 2 hours and 24 minutes with breaks. Time and 1/2 for reading, 3 hours and 41 minutes. Time and 1/2 for math only is 3 hours and 5 minutes. Double time for reading is 4 hours and 58 minutes, and double time for math only is 3 hours and 39 minutes. Again, a reminder, there is no self-pacing, so students do have to sit for the entire time that they're allotted. For the double time with reading students, just to call out, those students, when you get to the break between sections, so that student, the students have a 20-minute break between the sections, between reading and math. That break allows for a nutrition break. That test is a bit longer, right? When they're taking it with double time. So students not only have the break, but they're allowed to eat, and they get the 20-minute break so that they can eat something a little more substantial if they'd like. So if you want to look at kind of how the breaks, what it looks like when you're looking at break accommodations, you can kind of see where the breaks fall, especially for those extra breaks, right? It's a little bit different. So you'll see between Module 1 and Module 2 of reading and writing, those students receive an extra 5-minute break. And then between Module 1 and Module 2 of math, those students receive an extra 5-minute break there too. So this is just the differences between the different break accommodations. Breaks as needed also, I just want to call out. So again, we talked about breaks as needed as a kind of stop the clock break situation. Students press that button when they need to take a break. Those students, though, still do receive the standard break that other students receive, which is 10 minutes between the reading and writing and the math section. There are also some additional reading and writing accommodations. We know we have a number of students in Connecticut that have, that were previously approved for screen readers, may have been approved for pre-recorded audio, that accommodation that was available in paper testing or in the previous CII testing, or human reader. Students that are already approved for these, they will receive a test package that's configured to support the use of a screen reader or text-to-speech with their digital test package. They will also receive a test that is automatically configured to support students to test with time and 1/2. Okay, so if you have students that were approved let's say last year for pre-recorded audio, and now they're doing the new digital test with us. You don't have to change anything for those students. That pre-recorded audio approval means that in our new digital testing world, they will automatically get a test package configured to support the use of text-to-speech or a screen reader. Again, students who may have gotten a writer or scribe before or dictation, those students will receive a test that is automatically configured to support speech to text in their new digital test. For assistive technology, students will be able to take, if they had a previous approval for assistive technology, those students will be able to take the test using their approved assistive technology software. For example, if they had an electronic magnifying device, they will retain that approval. And then if a student has color overlay or color contrast, many students will be able to use the color settings available through their operating systems and on the device screen. So those students, you can make sure that their device is just configured, and if they're using their own device, it's probably already configured to support the color contrast that they need in their device settings. If those that are available through the operating system or the device don't meet the needs of the students, you can also then request that they use a plastic overlay that they can attach to their device's screens. So let's talk a little bit about screen readers and text-to-speech. This is something, we got a lot of questions about this in the fall. We know we have a number of students that use screen readers or use text-to-speech, so we just wanted to make sure we hit this a little bit. So screen readers, we're all setting what we're talking about, how we're talking about it here. Screen readers are specifically designed to serve the visually impaired who require assistance navigating from page to page and help with text and non-text elements on the screen. Screen readers also convert digital text to Braille for students who use refreshable Braille. And then text-to-speech software is not designed specifically for visually impaired students, but rather for those that may have a print or reading disability and need to hear the test. When we're talking about using screen reader and text-to-speech technology with Blue Book, so again, text-to-speech is used to have the on-screen text content read aloud, and then a screen reader is used to have all content, including graphics, read aloud. Students will receive an exam format enabled with time in 1/2, so they get extended time, because they will be to be able to support their use of the text-to-speech or screen reader. You're going to want to make sure, as I mentioned, we talked about making sure that students have an opportunity to take a practice test and try out their accommodations in advance of testing, make sure it works for them. So when you're going to have a student take that practice, take a practice test and try it out, you're going to want to make sure that you've configured, and you and your technology coordinator likely have worked together to configure the student's testing device accessibility settings before you open the Blue Book application for the test preview or the practice test, so that you want to make sure those configurations are set first, and then you open the Blue Book app. And then when it comes to test day, this is especially, if you've practiced with Blue Book and the student's using their own, a device, their one-to-one device or whatever, you should be fine. But especially if the students are, sharing devices, they're taking laptops off a cart or something, you're going to want to make sure and to double check before they open the test app and begin checking in on test day that the accessibility settings on the device support what the student needs for text-to-speech or screen reader. And an important call out here, screen reader and text-to-speech are not embedded in the Blue Book testing application. Students should use the application or program that they already know and in which they're comfortable using in the classroom. And so, if a student is using a Chromebook and they're using text-to-speech, they're gonna text-to-speech isn't embedded in Blue Book. They're gonna use Chromevox, the accessibility text-to-speech function that is available on Chromebooks. Okay, so it's important to understand that, and that oftentimes means that you need to work with your test coordinator to make sure a student's device is configured to allow those accessibility settings within their operating system. Our website has a lot of direction for how to configure the settings in a way that are needed to be able to work successfully with Blue Book. So it's work you're going to want to do with your tech coordinator in advance. As I mentioned, most operating systems have a built-in text-to-speech functionality available through the device accessibility settings. So Chromebooks have ChromeVox and Select to Speak. Apple devices have spoken content and voiceover. So you're just going to want to make sure that you are clear on the operating system you're using, and you work with your tech coordinator to configure and enable these settings before testing. Screen readers for the visually impaired are accessible through an external software or program. JAWS and NVDA work best with Bluebook. If you have another screen reader that you are using with your students, reach out to customer service so we can find the best way to support you. There is another accommodation kind of on this, talking about all of this, there's another accommodation that's available for students in digital testing now. So this is a new accommodation for this year with digital testing. It's Human Reader for digital exams. What that means is if a student's needs are not met using a screen reader or text-to-speech, the student can still take the digital test. You can request the Human Reader for digital exams accommodation. What that does mean is, like I said, the student still takes the digital test, still gets to experience the adaptive test in the shorter testing time. The Human Reader will read the content of the test from the computer screen for the student. Okay, so they're still going to be able to take that digital experience. Sometimes we know that students who have this accommodation, sometimes they also need a scribe. So if that's the case, they need somebody to enter the answers into Bluebook for them. If that's the case, you just request a scribe as well. This accommodation needs to be administered in a one-to-one setting because you have somebody reading the test to the student. So they're going to need to read that to that student in a one-to-one setting. And again, this makes it possible for the student to take the online digital assessment. There are also reading and writing accommodations that are related to print and what students can see. If a student is already approved for a large print test or a large print answer sheet or a magnification device, most students will be able to use the zoom in and zoom out functions in their operating systems to see the test in the way they need to see it. If that doesn't work for a student, you can also you can use a larger monitor, connect the student's device to a larger monitor. You can increase it even larger. If these things don't work for the student, don't work for their needs, you can request a paper test accommodation for students. You would need to specify the font size that is needed, and then they would then be approved for a large print test book for digital testing. So they would still have they would experience the digital SAT only in a paper format. We'll talk about this more when we get to requesting accommodations, but the linear paper format, so the format that students will take of the digital SAT if they're taking the paper test, that is a bit of a longer testing experience because it is not adaptive. There's also Braille with raised line drawings contracted. Students that are approved for the Braille accommodation already, they'll test with a digital exam using refreshable Braille and or a screen reader. Students using a screen reader will need to have headphones. And if the student is unable to test using the digital exam, they can receive a paper test. You would need to request a paper test as an accommodation for them. Students can take the digital exam and use the raised line drawing supplement as well. We also have raised line drawings available separately. Sometimes students use a screen reader and then request the raised line drawing separately, so that's still available. And then there's Braille Writer for a digital exam. Braille writing software should be used. If a student is unable to test using the digital exam and Braille Writer, they need to receive paper testing. Some additional accommodations to be aware of for function calculator. As we talked about, the SAT, the new digital SAT, you can use a calculator in the whole section. So you no longer need to request for function calculator for students for the no calculator section, because there is no more no calculator section. That applies not only to the digital test if you're taking it on the computer, but if a student is taking the linear paper version of the digital test, calculators are allowed on the whole math section as well. Limited testing time, the student, if a student was approved for limited testing time, the student will use the digital test and their test will be configured to support them testing over multiple days if that's necessary. If a student's approved for audio amplification or an FM system, a student can use their FM system with the digital test. The students will be allowed to use headphones. So for the next two accommodations, these things, if a student's approved for them, they still have them. They are not embedded into the technology though. So if a student receives ASL or signed exact English translation of directions, if they have approval for that, that is not embedded into the technology. That is a non-embedded accommodation. Same thing for food, drink, or medication. If a student has an approval for that and needs to eat or have food or medication or a drink during testing, that is outside of the technology, outside of the testing platforms. So you still administer that to the student. The students will still take the digital test, but this is a non-embedded accommodation. Some additional things to consider. There are some accommodations that you actually don't, if your students are just taking the SAT school day administration, it doesn't require approval in SSD to have these. Things like small group testing, right? Small group testing, you at a school, when you're setting up your testing rooms in your school, you have the ability to determine which kids go into which room and which kids you're going to test with other kids. So you kind of can control on your side. Do you want to have small group testing? You would put 5 kids in a room. You don't need to tell us that you're doing it or request that. One-to-one testing is the same thing. So you don't need to request just those things if that's the only accommodation they need. Preferential seating, wheelchair accessibility, familiar proctor. It can't be proctored by a relative, but other than that, as you can make sure that the student is being proctored by a teacher that they are familiar with. Other modified setting like special furniture, you don't need approvals for that for SAT school day testing. And access to nurse or aide during the breaks, that's also fine. If a student is going to take the SAT weekend test, right, if you think that's going to happen or they want to do that, you would need to request these for the SAT weekend test. And that's really to make sure that the test center they go to is aware of their needs. Paper accommodations and digital testing equivalents. We kind of talked through this a little bit, but there are, so if a student is approved for any of the things in the left column, right, so they already have an approval for Human Reader or other things there, they will receive automatically the digital testing equivalent in their test package. So if a student's approved for Human Reader, they're going to receive a test package configured to support a screen reader or text-to-speech. Now, it's important to know that in SSD Online, their accommodation is still going to show as what it was originally approved for, so Human Reader in this case, right? But when they get their test, when they sign in to take their test package will be one that is configured to support screen reader or text-to-speech. Now, I did mention we do have paper testing still available. Most students will take the digital SAT, but in some rare exceptions. So if a student has a significant visual impairment or severe physical or medical disability, a student may not be able to test using the computer. And in these rare cases, the SSD coordinator should request paper testing as an accommodation in SSD Online. So you don't kind of order it separately. It has to be requested in SSD Online. Now, from the accommodations dashboard, you'll select Other and specify details in the text box. So you'll choose Reading and Seeing Text. You'll select Other. And there's a text box that pops up. And so if you're requesting a paper test for a student, you put in there that you're requesting a paper test for a digital assessment. The paper version of the SAT is not linear. It is linear. It's not adaptive. Okay, so it is a longer testing experience for students. There's more information in the Accommodations and Supports Handbook about the paper testing experience for students. When a student is given a linear paper test, the student answers their questions in the test book, and then the SSD coordinator or other staff at the school then will transcribe what the student has in the test book into the Blue Book application. So there takes the student's paper test responses, transcribes them into the Blue Book application for the student. There will be directions on how to do that with the instructions that are received for paper testing when you receive those materials. All right, so let's talk about reviewing and requesting accommodations in SSD Online. A few best practices: start early. Having plenty of time makes it a lot smoother to go through the process of requesting these. The window to request accommodations for the Connecticut SAT school day began on November 10th and continues through January 12th. If possible, you're going to want to discuss testing accommodations and digital alternatives during IEP or 504 or other planned meetings so that you're clear about the student's accessibility needs. And you want to speak to students and their education team about the accommodations they're currently using during instruction and on classroom tests. Ideally, the best situation is when you're requesting an accommodation on behalf of a student, that you're requesting what they're already using in class. You want to also make sure the parents and guardians and students themselves understand the differences between College Board tests and statewide assessments and other local tests that are given in the classroom. So, for example, as we talked about extended time in College Board assessments, there's no self-pacing for those students with extended time. That may be very different than what they experience. They need to understand that so that on test day they know what they're getting. And then you want to carefully review and confirm student information before submitting accommodations requests, because you want to make sure there's no typos, no errors in what you've submitted. And check your SSD dashboard regularly, but also be on the lookout for communication for email communications from College Board. When there's a decision that's been received in your dashboard, you will get an email notification of that. So when should accommodations be requested? When a student has a documented disability, when there's a functional impact that for that student, and that has to be demonstrated. And then if documentation's requested, you'll see how to submit that, how to submit the Connecticut documentation. Okay, so let's talk about reviewing students' accommodations first, because the first thing you're going to want to do is look at your SSD Online dashboard and see what students already have accommodations, and are those accommodations correct for those students? Are they still accurate, still applicable to those students' needs? And then you'll also look and see who needs accommodations that isn't on that list. The way to do that now, it's hopefully be a lot easier for you to do this now. You do this in SSD Online. But in SSD Online, there's a new feature where you can export your dashboard. You used to be able to export the NAR, but it was very specific for a specific assessment and only available at a certain time. The dashboard is what is now exportable, and the dashboard can be exported at any time. You can use that to review students' accommodations in advance. You can use it to prepare for testing. There's a lot of things you can do with it. What you do is you click on the blue button that says Print Dashboard, and what will happen is you're actually exporting the dashboard. It will export as a CSV file, and then you'll be able to sort and filter that data. So you'll be able to sort, students by grade levels. You'll be able to sort students and filter by grade levels or by types of accommodations, types of supports they may receive. You'll also be able to look at submission status. So we're going to look and filter and see, okay, who's got approved accommodations, who may still have pending accommodations. You'll be able to use this tool to do your review process. If you do have to submit new requests for students, you log into SSD Online, you click the button for new request in the upper left-hand corner, and you're going to choose College Board accommodations to do that. You're going to search to find any student. If you have a new student, first you want to search to see if they actually have a record already, right? Sometimes they may have a record in your school associated with your school already, and you just didn't realize that you didn't see them. So you're going to search for that. It's going to search for the records associated with your school. If the student's found, you're going to kind of continue on with that student's profile. If you didn't find the student, you're going to click student. You're going to click on student not listed, and you're going to enter new information to create a new record for a new student. You'll then be asked to answer any questions on behalf of the student for whom you're requesting accommodations. The student's IEP or 504 plan provides the parental approval that's needed in Connecticut to apply for accommodations for the state test. So you're going to see a screen where it says, do you have parent or guardian consent? You can download a consent form. For Connecticut SAT School Day, that's not needed because the IEP or 504 plan provides that approval. Then you're going to want to submit the new request. You're going to start providing information about that new student. You're going to provide the name and birth date and all that kind of stuff. When you're doing this, please double check and make sure that you're entering right information, that the student's name is spelled correctly, that their birthday is correct. If you enter incorrect information at this point, it makes it much more difficult down the line to make sure the student is getting their accommodations that they're supposed to have. So you're going to answer questions about their disabilities and their accommodations. So you'll select the accommodation that you're requesting or accommodations that you're requesting for that student. There are a number of categories that you'll see. You'll see it listed in there. So there's extended time, and then you'll see the extended time accommodations. There's different categories you could click on. When you click on it, you're going to click add, and then you're going to add in the timing. So let's say we're requesting extended time for a student. You choose the section. Is it reading? Is it a reading section? You then choose the timing that you need. Time and 1/2 is in there as a standard option, as is double time. We may have some students that need more than double time, and you can put that in there as well. Then you're going to enter the school plan information. So what is the student's plan? Indicate if the accommodations that you're requesting are used on classroom tests already. And then you want to provide information about the process that was used to determine the student's need. And if you're asked to upload documentation, what you'll do for Connecticut SAT School Day is you upload the SSD form, the Connecticut SAT School Day SSD form. So you don't need other documentation, you just use the form. When you get the deck, you'll be able to link into that. Then ultimately you sign off on the terms and agreements. You're confirming that what you've given us is true and accurate and that you've represented it correctly. And that's how you request a new accommodation. If you can also change an accommodation request. If a student already has an accommodation in the system or accommodations in the system and they need to change, you can do that in SST Online, or you can remove accommodations requests in SST Online. So a couple scenarios. It can be hard to talk about this stuff in the abstract. So let's talk about this in some specifics. So scenario 1, you have a student who receives extended time on classroom tests as per their IEP. And that student sometimes uses that time to complete the test, but most often uses that time to take additional breaks during testing. So in that kind of situation, what do you need to think about to make sure that the student is, that you're requesting what the student actually needs for testing? So I guess there are two questions here. Does the student need more on the clock time for actually testing, right? Does the student really need more time to test? If that's true, then an extended time accommodation may be most appropriate for the student. But if the student needs more stop the clock time, more time to get up and take a break, extended time may not be the right choice. Maybe what that student really needs is breaks as needed, because what they don't need more time to sit there and work on test questions. They need more time to be able to get up and take a break. So you want to think about the student's needs and then make the accommodations request kind of based on what that student truly needs. Again, remember there's no self-pacing in the test in extended time. So if the student has extended time, they have to sit for the entire time allotted. And before requesting the accommodations, we really suggest that you discuss the student's needs with the student and their family, right? So the student understands what each of these accommodations are that you're requesting and what that means for them. We recommend that the student, as I mentioned at the beginning, that the student takes a practice test in Blue Book to experience what does that feel like to take this test with extended time? What does that feel like to take this test with extended breaks? And hopefully by doing that, the student can have the best testing experience because they know what they're getting and you were able, and then that you're able to request the accommodation based on what their needs are. A second scenario to think through, a student uses large print instructional materials in class per their IEP. So when you're thinking about the digital SAT, a couple things to consider. Before requesting the accommodations, first, discuss the needs with the student and their family. And then for some students, it might make sense to make sure that those kids are trying out the practice test in Blue Book to see how the zoom in and zoom out tools may work, because that might work for them, right? If that meets their needs, then you don't have to request an accommodation for them. They can use the universal tools and be just fine. You may be able to find though, okay, maybe that doesn't work, but if you have their computer connected to a larger screen, like a TV or a projector, or they're using some sort of magnification device, maybe that works for the student. And again, if that's the case, you just do that. You don't need to request something for that. But if that doesn't meet the student's needs, and if there may be some cases and some rare cases where that doesn't meet the student's needs, in those cases, paper testing may be appropriate, and then you would need to request a paper test accommodation for that student. And then the third scenario, a student has a human reader accommodation for tests per their IEP. So in many cases, students who have the human reader accommodation will test digitally using text-to-speech. But again, before requesting the accommodation for a student, you might want to discuss, you should discuss the student's needs with the student and their family. Again, this is another situation where it will be helpful for the student to kind of try out the practice test in Blue Book with the text-to-speech function. to see if that does meet the student's needs. And then if that's the case, you know what to request for the student. If that doesn't meet the student's needs, maybe you want to think about human reader for digital testing, so that student can still have the digital experience. They have a human reader, but can still have the adaptive experience. So those are some things to think about. And again, try it out, use the practice test, and give kids the opportunity to see what this experience is going to be like for them. Let's move on to talk about multilingual learner supports. The multilingual learner supports that we have, we still have the same 3 that we've had in previous years. EL time in 1/2. So this student's testing with this, when an EL student, multilingual learner that tests with EL time in 1/2 will receive a college reportable score. The student receives time in 1/2, 50% extended time on each section of the test. Remember that the students have to sit for the entire time allotted. There's no self-pacing. And that students who do receive EL time in 1/2 can be tested with other students that are receiving time in 1/2. So if you have a student receiving an accommodation for time in 1/2 and a student receiving the EL support for time in 1/2, they can test in the same room. The student, this support needs to be requested in SSD Online for students by the January 12th deadline to make sure that the student's test package that they receive is configured with the right timing support for them. And then EL supports expire annually. So if a student had an EL support last year and they need it again this year, you need to request it again this year in SSD Online. There are 2 other EL supports. These do not need to be requested in SSD Online. So these are just things that you can provide to students. You don't need to notify us of them. The first one is translated test directions. So we have test directions translated into a number of different languages. We will have those posted by February, so that you'll have time to be able to print those out and get them prepared for students that may need them. CSDE will have these test directions posted on their webpage. There are a number of languages available. You can see there. If a student needs a language that we don't have it available for, you can locally have a translator provide an on the fly translation of test directions if you'd like. And then the word-to-word bilingual dictionaries. There's an approved list of dictionaries on College Board's website. And again, this does not require any sort of request in SSD Online to use that with a student. When you request multilingual learner supports, you go into SSD Online and you're going to be able to choose the type of accommodation. There's College Board accommodations. You'll also see EL supports. So to request time in 1/2 for a multilingual student in SSD Online, you go in and you click on the English learner support, and you can place that request. There's no documentation required. And like I said before, that using translated test directions or word-to-word bilingual dictionaries does not require a submission in SSD Online. Let's talk about some resources. There are a bunch of resources available to you. Deirdre and Katie have done a great job of making sure that you've got resources available. So on the Connecticut SAT School Day webpage, there's an accommodations crosswalk for the Connecticut SAT School Day. There's also an accessibility chart that could be really helpful for you. And there's a number of resources in general about testing with us available on the Connecticut SAT School Day webpage that CSDE maintains. With that, we are at the end. We have we can answer any questions. If you need help, though, before we get to any questions that may still be in the chat, if you need help, please do feel free to reach out to us. The phone number is on the screen. The email is on the screen. You can also visit the Connecticut SAT School Day webpage that CSDE maintains. Deirdre and Katie and Michelle and Abe are always around to help you as well. So we all want to make sure that you have what you need so that your students can get the accommodations and supports that they need. So, Michelle, how are we doing with questions in the chat?
Wow, take a breath and a bow. That was pretty amazing. That was a lot of information. I'm sure that people are feeling a little, maybe overwhelmed. There's a lot, yes. But just to reiterate what you said, please reach out to Deirdre, myself, about any questions you might have. No question is a silly question. We're here to, help you with any questions that you have. And I know there was a bunch of things going around in the chat. I don't know if Keisha and Deirdre want to come back on, if there's things we needed to revisit. I'm not sure.
Yes, one item that I did want to revisit. Adrian, can you talk to the group a little bit more about the option to waive for the specific test admin?
Yes, I can absolutely do that. So, for the spring SAT school day testing, you will be using, so schools will have access, districts will have access to a new system called the State Data Management System. It's used just for SAT state testing in the spring. This is the system that CSDE will use to provide student registration data to the College Board. Okay. And then in this system, you'll be able to see that student registration data, and you'll be able to see and waive student accommodations in there. So if you have students who want to keep their approved accommodations to use on other tests, but want to waive it just for the SAT school day administration, you'll be able to waive those accommodations in the SDMS system. You will get more information about the SDMS system and how to use it and how to do this exact thing in the SDMS system in January.
Okay. Just scrolling through. There was one question I just wanted to be clear about because Deirdre and I worded it differently. So I wanted to be clear to the group. So the question was about can students with TTS test in the same, in a different room, in a regular room with headphones? So the screen reader TTS students they will automatically receive 50% time. So we do prefer that you keep them all in the same testing room in terms of because they're on the same timing versus students who would not receive 50%, they're getting less time. Can they test in the same room? Is there any, way that they could not? Sure. But we would recommend it be a much larger room because the timing is going to be different, especially when these kids are taking breaks. So we do not want to increase the risk of disruption.
Great, thank you. I see a couple questions coming in here that I can probably jump in and talk about. Victoria, your question, is a student's SSD accommodations connected to their Blue Book account, or will we have to change the test settings in each Blue Book, in each instance of Blue Book for a student? So a student's accommodations, the student receives the accommodations that they are approved for. They are already configured in the test that the student will access in their account using their credentials in Blue Book. Okay, so if a student is supposed to receive time and a half, when that student logs in using their credentials to Blue Book, their test time will automatically be for time and a half. Now, the thing to know and the things you will need to configure is if the student is using a screen reader or text-to-speech or some sort of assistive technology, there will be device settings you'll need to configure because those things have to be set in the device that the student's going to use. So I think those are some things to be aware of that you will need to work with your technology coordinator to make sure that the student device is configured to do that. So for example, if a student has text-to-speech and you're using a Chromebook, and so they're going to use ChromeVox as their text-to-speech functionality, there are configurations that you and your tech coordinator will want to make sure are set so that ChromeVox will work optimally with Blue Book. Okay, so the student will their test package is configured to allow the use of the screen of text to speech and allow the timing, but still some accessibility feature settings will need to be set so that you can make sure that ChromeVox is working well with Blue Book for the student. So I hope that is helpful. If you do have questions on what needs to be configured, right? So we have on our SSD webpage, and in this particular deck, when you probably saw that there was, if you looked at the deck already, there's some appendix slides that have some more information about the different text-to-speech options and screen reader options. So we have a bunch of information on our website. There's more information available to be able to help you figure out exactly what you need to do to configure those those functionalities to work best for the student with Blue Book. If you're struggling and you're not sure, you can call our tech support and they can help you with that too. They can walk you through it.
I'm going to jump down to a follow-up question that I have responded to from Kim. Is there a deadline to waive accommodations in SDMS in order for the student to be set up for test day?
I'm sorry.
Adrian,
I'm sorry.
is there, that's okay. Is there a deadline to waive accommodations in SDMS in order for the
Yes.
student to be set up for test
Great.
day?
Thank you, Keisha. So we're still working on the exact timing. It'll probably be 2 days before testing, but we will provide you with more information when we get into the spring about the exact timing on that. And that's because, like I said, your student receives a test package already configured with the accommodation settings. Then they are welcome to waive them. We understand that some students will want to do so, but then we need time to configure a new test package for them, right? Because we want to make sure, okay, if they're waiving their extended time, they need a test package that doesn't have extended time configured. So we need a little bit of time to configure that. Like I said, it's probably going to be 2 days before testing, but we do need to confirm that, and we will follow up in communications when we get into the January, February timeframe.
So to look at it another way, say I come in to the test, I'm a student, I have a letter from my parent, I don't want to use 50% extended time. I can't test that day. I
Very
have
true.
to wait until you go in and remove it, and it's probably going to take 2 days. So I want to just make sure everyone's crystal clear on that. You can't, like last year, you could go right in, remove it, boom, test them. You can't do that this year.
Yeah,
But
so
anyway,
there's
yeah.
a little bit of a trade-off, right? You don't have to do the accommodation settings in Tide like you used to, right? And that was not fun, right? And so that whole process goes away. We're going to do that work for you, but in that case, since we're doing the work for you, you do need to know that if a student wants to waive it, we need to know in advance of testing so that we can reconfigure that test package for them. If a student comes in that day, as Michelle said, okay, you can waive it, but you can't test today, we'll need to reschedule you for another day.
Question about TDTK. When will the school be able to access TDTK?
So the test day toolkit will be available to Connecticut schools starting on February 5th. I see a question here, when will you be able to see the students in Test Day Toolkit once you have
Yes.
access to Test Day Toolkit?
Right.
So we're still working on that exact timing. Because we're building the state data management system right now, we then have to work with the state to work on when we will receive the registration data for those students. Then it'll take us a little bit of time, and then you'll be able to see students. So it should be pretty close to February 5th, but we just need a little more time to be able to confirm that date for you.
We'll definitely be in touch, and we also have some test coordinator training planned around that time, so that in case you have any problems, we can actually like get into the system and take a look at things. And we'll talk about some of those changes to the system, because there are some changes that have come about as a result of PSAT and what feedback you've gotten that are definitely positive things for the spring window. So we will definitely let you know about that. And the other big difference this year is that instead of having set days to update the file upload will be done nightly based on any changes in PSIS. So it'll be similar to what you've been doing for Smarter Balance, that kind of nightly push.
I'm scrolling back up to a question. I did see James answered it, but I want to make sure that we are addressing the specific breaks that they're talking about. So the question is, can a student have both extra time and breaks, or does extra time give breaks automatically? So I'll drop down to the second part. So extra time will include breaks, additional breaks by default. Can the student be approved as far as in SSD for extended time and breaks? Yes, they can. We do, as Adrian had showed earlier, we have different break variations. Extra breaks would include would be 5-minute breaks versus extended breaks. Extended breaks simply double the amount of extra breaks. So from 5, it goes to 10. And then the breaks as needed accommodation, that also I want to call out. If you have breaks as needed, you do not need the other break combinations for students because they're allowed to break frequently throughout the test, as opposed to the other 2 breaks, extra and or extended. Those are designated breaks. Breaks as needed will allow you to stop. We also refer to it as stop the clock breaks throughout the test, and that's also a reasonable break time. We typically say usually no more than 10 minutes, but of course this may vary depending on the individual need. James, did I skip over any questions? I'm just trying to go through. I know we kind of duplicated over each other in some instances.
No, most of the questions, there were just multiple questions about the waiving of accommodations. That was a big one. And questions about the functionality of screen readers.
Yes.
We have some SST office hours coming up. We had scheduled some SST office hours. So do
Yeah,
know
thanks for
this is,
advertising that.
I was gonna say it's not your last chance to talk
let
to
me
us.
grab it,
So-
grab those and put them into the chat so people know. And you don't have to register, you just jump on when you wanna, if you wanna join. So hold on, let me find that.
Yeah, so I bring that up because this isn't your last chance to ask a question. Obviously, you can always reach out to us, but we will have these office hours to be able to take the opportunity to answer any questions you may have leading up to test day. And so just wanted to call that out.
For the person who put in the message about the EL student who's also identified as LD, could you just, if I skipped over it, could you just put your email in the chat if you don't mind, so I can reach out to you directly to discuss this specific individual issue?
Alrighty. It seems like maybe we're at the end. Did we lose Michelle? Oh, there she is.
No, I'm here. I'm here.
Okay. I was nervous. I was nervous we lost you.
Nope. No, I am here. Yeah, no, I think we pretty much wrapped up. I don't notice anything else in the chat anymore, but we are available for name
Oh.
change form. Is that if their name is different than what's in PSIS maybe, and that's different in SSD? I'm not sure.
So
If-
if the student's name is different in SSD, and you want to do an update to that, the name change, we can provide you with the link for the name change form. They are okay. Yes, we can have our customer care team assist with making the update for that information.
So what you're going to want to do, though, is you're going to want to make sure that the student's name matches the name that we receive from the state in their registration data. Okay? Because if there's a different name in SSD Online from what the state has given us, it's not, the accommodations won't match up for the student. So you will need to make sure that what is in PSIS for the student matches what is in SSD Online for in College Board system. No more tied, correct? No more tied.
Not for SAT.
Not for
There's
SAT, I'm
still
sorry. Yes.
tied for Smarter
tied for me.
Balance. There's Cambium tides for Smarter Balance, NGSS, CTAA. So you didn't get rid of it. You just gained another friend, a new friend called Blue Book,
Friend. Exactly.
which I think
I
you've
see-
all mostly used with PSAT. So
Yeah,
you
most of
guys
you
have
used it.
kind of gotten used to the system. And as I said, we'll let you know there are going to be some improvements in the spring, which I don't
So-
feel like we've talked about those yet, but I know we will when we get
We
to
will,
the
yeah.
training.
I see, Pat, that your question here with the breaks as needed accommodation, can we put those students together? You typically only have a handful. So Keisha, correct me if I am wrong here, but you can test these students together. You're going to want to make sure the room is large enough, and so that students kind of aren't on top of each other. So if they do get up to like take a break and they need to stretch or whatever, and that those students have some space, they're not going to disrupt the other students in the room. But you can test those students together.
Yep, that's the answer.
I'm learning. I got it.
And the question above that, Adrian, is about the student's age. On the waiver information, the student must be 18 on or before the test date.
To waive their accommodations.
Yes.
Kim, you
We
asked a
do
question.
have training.
Yeah.
Yeah, Kim. I've been sending out emails with the training flyer. I sent one out and it had all the trainings in there that we're having. So if you open up that flyer, you can click on the links to register. We're actually having the SAT, the coordinator training in person and also virtual. So you can sign up for either one of those. So yeah, hopefully you will. If you didn't get that and you're wondering where it is, just send me an email and I'll send it to you. And then I saw something about AP. No, AP does not use Tide. It never has.
AP will use the Blue Book app. It'll be the same app that you're using for SAT. Okay. So just know that it's the same application. I know you're used to things being really separate for SAT and AP, but this time we're working together and you're going to use the same app for that.
I actually don't think the training is posted on the web page, but oh, this training will be. Sorry, I thought we were talking about the training schedule. But yeah, you can reach out to us. And we do put all of our, we have all the recordings of all the webinars we've done, plus the slides posted to our website. Yeah.
Quick note, I see lots of familiar names on this, and I want to say hi to all of you. Thank you for your time and coming with us on this new journey. We're looking forward to seeing all of you in February. If you want to come and see us in person, we'll be up there. But it's just nice to see so many of you.
We'll definitely do that one. I'm sorry for those of you where we canceled the one this week. We just didn't have that many people that had signed up. So the website to access the recording is the same website to access the presentation that Deirdre gave you the link to. The recording will be put there once it's ready. And it probably will be tomorrow because it's pretty quick. All right, I think we can wrap it up. What do you think?
I think we answered a lot.
Yeah, the in-person training, February. I don't remember the date.
I think it's the second week of February, I think.
But Marissa, you can send me an email and I can send you the training flyer. We also have it posted, the links to register on our website under our Trumba calendar, some crazy calendar that we keep all the events for the State Department of Education on. Everything's on there to register too, if you could find it. I mean, who knows? I shouldn't be like that, but I don't think our website's that well organized. But anyway, just send me an email and I'll get you the information about the trainings. Okay, and my email was back along with Deirdre's on the second slide with my amazing Yorkie, Stella. All right, everyone. Thank you. Have a great day.
Have a great afternoon. Thank
Everyone,
you.
thank
you,
you.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.